Hello and welcome to C-Suite Middle East. Today we'll be talking to Nauman Ansari, the Chief Executive Officer of Faysal Bank in Pakistan. Faysal has over 20 years of banking experience in top brands such as Standard Chartered Bank, Bank of America, Fortis Bank, ABN AMRO, and Crescent Commercial Bank in Pakistan. He first joined Faysal Bank in 2008, and since then, the bank has had significant growth. In the last 24 months, they've had more than 50% net profit growth. Nauman, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shane. Pleasure to be here.
So most people, especially when they start out their career, they just look at the coveted CEO position as this role that just can't be achieved, or how do I become a CEO? What's really your insight on managing your career into the top job?
Well, my advice would be to make sure that you focus on the fundamentals, the basics, when you start in your career. And I think that would be working hard, remaining focused, and making sure that you're equipped with the right skill set. You need to have a plan. You need to work on that plan in a very focused manner. And that's it.
A lot of people say one of the things that separates us from the animals is our imagination, our ability to envision 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road. And for top performers in the West, or you look at the American MBA 101, they say vision, strategy, mission. Sometimes when you come to the East, it's more of an organic process that people just develop organically over time. Where do you sit? Should young executives create a vision for themselves, or is that not as applicable in this market?
I think it's applicable in any market, and I think especially in a fast-changing, interdependent world and a workplace as it exists now, you need to have a forward-looking approach to anything, really, to your personal life, to your work, to your career. So I think it's very important to stay in the moment and focus on your job and focus on the fundamentals and basics. But I think it's also very important to think about the future and how the future unfolds. So that would entail talking to people, getting good mentors, reading a lot. That would entail all of these things. But I think it's very, very important in terms of determining your direction for your future career and imagining where you want to be.
Some people I work with use vision boards. Other people say start from when your death, and work back from what you want to achieve in your life. Other people say, look, let's just look at it on an annual basis. This is what I want to achieve this year. What's your approach to really creating that vision?
Well, my personal experience is that I've had medium-term objectives in my career. So when I started out in banking, and it was an accident really, it was not really planned in terms of getting into banking. I stumbled upon it. But once I got into banking, I had maybe just a 4 or 5 year sort of a horizon in terms of objectives and in terms of places where I wanted to be at. So I think that is something that that worked for me. But I think there are a lot of people who want to have a very even a longer term time horizon in terms of where they want to be 10 years or 20 years, or as you said, till the end of life. Well, whatever works for you. But I think it's very important that you have a forward-looking approach and anticipating the future. I think that's very, very important, and how you fit into it.
So I see you took the effort to go overseas for your education. You're educated in Ohio in the United States of America. Is that something you would suggest individuals from this region of the world should experience? And is that something that's going to help you move your career forward?
I think I would suggest that absolutely. My experience was when I went to the US, I came from a very protected background, and I'd lived in Karachi in Pakistan all my life. I had started my education there. I went to high school there. So it was I lived in a very stable, well-knit environment, really. So it was I think it worked out really well that I went to an environment that I was not familiar with. It really helped me develop confidence, get the kind of exposure that I would have never gotten in Pakistan. It was a very multicultural environment, and it teaches you a lot of things. It helps you in building confidence. And you get exposed to people from all kind of backgrounds. So I think that as a base of launching into any career is something that is wonderful, really.
When you look at banking, and as a CEO, you have to have that cross-functional experience. Often people can get siloed. You become the bond guy, or you become a pure play retail banker. What should people be doing to make sure they get that full cross-functional experience, to make sure that they're qualified to take the top job when it comes up?
Any CEO has a predominantly has an area of focus or background or expertise. You can't, it's very difficult to have an exposure to all the major areas in banking, and especially in this specialized world. Every CEO has one or two major areas of expertise or core functions. But I think it's always good to plan. It's good to make an effort to make sure that one gets a broad experience as far as banking is concerned. So, for example, if you start out in a commercial bank and you start out in retail banking, you may be interested in how treasury functions, or a bond desk functions, or a money market desk functions, or how the wholesale bank functions. So it's your curiosity, and it's how career oriented you are. And if an area interests you, then it is up to you to prepare yourself to have that skill set to move into that area and get that exposure. I think most banks and good institutions and financial institutions have a program or have a mechanism in place where they afford good employees the opportunity to get that multifunctional experience. But I think at the end of the day, it's really boils down to the individual.
You're saying it comes also when I look at the subtext of what you're saying, is it's about intellectual curiosity. It's about looking at the wider picture of what role does banking play in society, and how can I learn more about that, and by default that will lead you through a cross-functional experience.
Sure. Because when you start out, you're going to be a small cog in the wheel, and you're going to be very micro-focused. But I think it's also important to take a step back and see and to fulfill your intellectual curiosity in terms of overall what function do banks play in a society or an economy. And I think that zooming in and zooming out helps a lot.
Right.
And it gives you a wider perspective.
That one piece, they say intellectual curiosity, is almost missing though from society. If you take something simple like what made this paper fall, they say, oh, it's gravity. But if you ask anyone what actually gravity is, they can't answer it. But they've been content with just being able to label it something. So the lack of intellectual curiosity, I think, plagues our society, but that's probably another show. What would you say are your big insights or mantras or philosophies of driving a business, of running a bank? Do you have any kind of North Stars or overlying macro philosophies that you use?
Well, we've got a set of values that we try and follow in letter and in spirit. I think it's all about creating the kind of environment and culture that wants our employees, our other stakeholders, our customers to keep on banking and to be a part of the story that Faysal Bank has embarked upon. So, and it's not a short-term oriented approach. It's a medium to long-term vision, a course of action.
Yeah, I think you're looking more at creating culture, and that's one of the things that we look at as a leader. And sometimes you ask a CEO, say, what kind of culture are you creating? They're not sure, but leaders are culture creators. And I think that's what you're saying, is that the focus really needs to be on what kind of culture you're creating, and how are you creating that?
Well, I think creating a culture and environment is the most difficult part, because it takes time, it needs to be thought through. It's basically the DNA, it's the binding force that binds people together. And it's not only employees, it's overall the place where you operate in a society, in an environment, really. So, talking about a bank, talking about Faysal Bank in particular, obviously we operate in over 80 cities. We interact with all kinds of stakeholders, customers, regulators. So I think the forming that DNA and making that as a part of our employees and our stakeholders' day-to-day life, I think that is the challenge. But I think it can be done, and it can be done effectively if you have a vision and you can communicate and you can get other people on board in sharing that vision.
When you use terminology or vernacular like the binding force, and to me that really speaks to the values, because at the end of the day what binds us as humans is sharing similar values. And in some sense it almost looks like the bankers have lost that belief in the value that banks play in society. And I feel that they play one of the biggest roles in creating freedom. Your access to capital is really your ticket or the passport to changing your economic place you occupy within society. You can only move up if you have that access to capital, which is so free-giving in the West and sometimes hard to get. It's hard to get unsecured debt here in the East. Do you feel that maybe we've lost that touch with the value of the banking system in society?
Well, to a certain extent, I think we have. But I think if financial institutions and banks have to play the role that they are created for, I think it's very important that, for example, access to capital is treated as not only as a business objective, but it's also treated as, well, as far as I'm concerned, it's basically a human right. I mean, so to give you an example, in Pakistan, 99% of homes are equity financed. And if you start out even if you have done your graduation and if you're a white-collared person, a career-oriented professional, you start out at, it'll probably take you half of your life to own your own home, as opposed to a lot of other their counterparts, young professionals, their counterparts in the West. They can take out a mortgage very easily, fairly easily, and own a home quite early in their life. That's not the case in a lot of countries in the East and in this region, and this should change and is changing. So, but I think it starts with really comprehending or really understanding the kind of role banks need to play going forward. And I think they can contribute a lot in terms of economic growth and basically giving the kind of financial flexibility to their customers.
What advice would you have for any students coming out of school and looking at a career in banking?
Well, I think you need to really know what banking is all about. So I think do the research, really try to understand what kind of roles banks play. I think it's also about setting good role models. And unfortunately, from a global perspective, I think banks and bankers have not really done justice to the kind of roles banks should play. But I think it's very important that it's not all about money, it's not about, all about glamour and enjoying the limelight. It's basically making sure that you help fulfill ambitions and dreams of your customers and society at large. So I think it has to be a wider perspective rather than enjoying the good old high life.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us today, and hopefully we can see you again soon.
Thank you, Shane. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.